Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining me on the Global Day of Jewish Learning. My name is Natan Slifkin. I'm the director at the Biblical Museum of Natural History in Bet Shemesh. Hard for me to tell if anyone's here, actually. So I don't have the feedback for that on my computer. So if you are here, I guess it would be helpful if you type into the group chat. You just select the chat button and just type a quick hi. And then we'll know. It'll help me to know who's here. It's definitely easier giving an online class if you can see that if you're aware that you're speaking to an audience. Anyone typing hi? Not yet. Okay. Hopefully, I am speaking to somebody. Okay. So the topic for today is the animal kingdom in Jewish thought. Now, that's a topic that's basically fascinated me my entire life. The whole life I've been obsessed with animals. My parents took me to the zoo when I was 5, picked me up when I was 12, and ever since then I've been keeping a wide range of exotic, extraordinary creatures, learning everything I could about them. And then about 20 years ago, I started looking into what does the Torah have to say about the animal kingdom. And to my everlasting pleasure, I found this incredible wealth of material to explore, to study, to investigate, to work with. I started writing various books on that topic, culminating kind of in this book came out last year, the Torah Encyclopedia of the Animal Kingdom. And then I was teaching in various zoos about Judaism and the animal kingdom. And then 2 years ago, we opened the Biblical Museum of Natural History in Bet Shemesh, dedicated to this topic. So what is the idea of Judaism and the animal kingdom? What does it mean? So most people, what comes to mind might be Noah's Ark, but there's a lot more to it than that. There's actually, there's several aspects of the connection between Judaism and the animal kingdom. So first of all, there's the idea of drawing inspiration. It's drawing inspiration from the beauty, from the wonder of the natural world. Throughout Tanakh, we find the idea of Morabu Ma'asecha Hashem, how great are your works, God. That we contemplate the wonders of inspiration, the wonders of God's creation, and we draw inspiration from that. The Gemara even says that when you see really beautiful creatures, there's a special bracha that you make on them. It's Baruch shekacha lo ba'olamo. Blessed is the one who has such creatures in his world. It's a blessing that you make on beautiful creatures. So what's counted as a beautiful creature? So Rav Yosef discusses it. He says a beautiful parrot would count. So over in the museum, we have this beautiful parrot that people make the bracha on, Baruch shekacha lo ba'olamo. And it's interesting, the parrot itself has heard people saying it so much that the parrot itself has started to make the bracha. It walks out, Baruch shekacha lo ba'olamo. So that's a bracha that you make on beautiful creatures. And there's really no end to the wonders of nature. My whole life I've been studying, the wonders of the animal kingdom, and that's one of the things I love about it. There's always something new to learn about, to be amazed at, to be inspired about. So many of us were familiar with this idea, niflat habore, the wonders of creation, and that's definitely it's an aspect of Judaism's relationship with the animal kingdom. But I would say it's a relatively minor aspect, certainly in terms of the areas that we're working with at the Biblical Museum of Natural History. It's a relatively minor aspect. What I want to focus on more is other aspects, including, let's start off with the idea of identification, of identifying the animals of the Torah. The Torah mentions lots of different animals, over 100 different animals mentioned in the Torah. Not every animal is in the Torah. And identifying them can sometimes be a challenge. But before getting into that, there's some basic concepts we have to introduce. So one is to understand that only certain class groups of animals are going to be mentioned in the Torah. What do I mean? I mean as follows. You're not going to find penguins or pandas or polar bears mentioned in the Torah. Why not? If there's anyone here who's participating and has the online chat feature, which then you can feel free to type in suggestions for any of the questions that I may pose. Anyone want to suggest an answer? Why don't we find penguins, polar bears, or pandas in the Torah? So we can pose a similar question, a related question, which is why don't polar bears eat penguins? Polar bears don't eat penguins. Why not? The answer is very simple. Polar bears live at the North Pole. Penguins live at the South Pole. Whereas, obviously, Tanakh takes place in the land of Israel, in this part of the world. That's where you're not going to find penguins or polar bears or pandas mentioned in the Tanakh. Right? The animals of Tanakh are going to be the animals of Israel, and the animals of the region of Israel, because that is the region in which Tanakh takes place. Okay, it looks like the chat function has been disabled, unfortunately. So tech support said that if anyone types anything in, it's going to be relayed to me here. Okay. 1 second, let me just reply something to tech support. Okay. Now, but it's a bit more complicated. It's not as though, it's not as though you can get a book. I have various books here on wildlife of Israel. Right? It's not as though you can take these books and then see what the animals are of the Torah. Why not? Because the wildlife of Israel today is not the same as the wildlife of Israel in biblical times. Today, I'm talking to you from Ramat Beit Shemesh, where I live. So outside in the street, through my window, I can see myna birds. Myna birds, one of the most common birds in Israel, but they're not mentioned anywhere in the Torah. Why not? Because myna birds are from India. When I moved to Israel 25 years ago, the only myna birds here were in pet stores, imported from India, selling for about 5,000 shekels each. 2 or 3 years after that, 23 years ago, there was a guy in Tel Aviv who bought 10 of them. They all escaped, reproduced very successfully. And now, 23 years later, it's one of the most common birds in the land of Israel, everywhere. But they're not originally from here, so they're not going to be mentioned in the Torah. Right? There's Australian ringneck parakeets that I see in my garden regularly. Again, not native to Israel. They're from Australia, as their name would suggest. Just escaped pets that established and became native here. So there's lots of different animals that you'll find in Israel today, cats, right, which are not originally from here, and therefore they're not mentioned in Tanakh. Conversely, there's many other animals that are mentioned in Tanakh and that used to live here, but which don't live here anymore. For example, here we go. Here we go. Can you see this? Can everyone see this? So this is the head of a crocodile. Now, crocodiles are mentioned in several places in Tanakh. They are called tanin in Hebrew. Now, tanin is an interesting word. Sometimes tanin means a whale. Sometimes tanin means a snake. But sometimes tanin definitely means a crocodile. The prophet Yechezkel says that Paro is the great tanin who lives in the river Nile. Right? That's the Nile crocodile. The crocodile is the #1 predator in the Nile. And Paro is therefore, Paro, king of Egypt, is symbolized as being the Nile crocodile. And interestingly, when God appears to Moses, Moses throws down his stick, it turns into a nachash, which is a snake. But when Aaron goes before Paro and throws down his stick, it turns into a tanin. It doesn't say nachash, it says tanin. So why does the word change? So tanin can also mean snake, but it can also mean crocodile. So the Midrash points out that the reason why the Torah uses the word tanin here, that Aaron's stick turns into a tanin, is to refer to the crocodilian meaning of the word and to the symbolism of Paro as the crocodile. And the message is that Aaron's saying, look, Paro, this stick represents you. You think you're this mighty crocodile who can eat everyone up, who has all the power. But what are you in my hands? In my hands, you're just a stick, right? When I pick you up, you're just a stick. And so too, right? Paro, you think you have this tremendous power to inflict slavery, subjugation upon the Jewish people, but realize that all that power you've had has just been as God's stick. You've just been the tool of God. And when God says it's time to stop, you've got to listen to him. Excuse me. So that's the symbolism of the tanin, the crocodile representing Paro. And it's not just in Egypt that you had crocodiles, right? I mean, this species, the Nile crocodile, which, as its name suggests, was dominant in the Nile. It also lived in the land of Israel. Until the beginning of the 20th century, there were wild crocodiles living in Israel. They were last found in a place which has been called Nachal Taninim, near Netanya. Nowadays, the only wild crocodiles you'll find in Israel is that every so often some of them escape from the crocodile farm. There's 2 crocodile farms in Israel, one in the north, one in the south. But those crocodiles were imported from Africa But until just about a century ago, there were wild crocodiles living in the land of Israel. And so that's an example of how, in order to to identify the animals that Tanakh are talking about, you've got to be familiar with the animals that live in Israel, not today, but in the past. Another example, in the book of Eov, there's description of an animal called the behemoth, right? Behemoth in Hebrew, not as the plural of the word behemoth, but as a singular form, the behemoth. For a long time, nobody knew how to identify it, so they would transliterate it as behemoth. And that's how the word behemoth entered the English language, to refer to a large, monstrous creature of unspecified description. But then eventually it was discovered that this animal, which was described as a huge, monstrously powerful animal that lives in the swamp and that eats grass and that has an enormous mouth, it's a hippopotamus. So why did nobody think of identifying it as a hippopotamus? Because, again, these translations of the book of Eov were being done in Europe. And people in Europe just were not, in the medieval period, they were not very familiar with the hippopotamus. It was an African animal. But in biblical times, it's also an animal that lived in this part of the world. And it's therefore mentioned in the book of Eov. So if we're talking about animals that are mentioned in Tanakh, which were native to the region of the land of Israel, but which don't live here anymore, it's the crocodile, the hippopotamus. Here's another one. What's this? If anyone has access to the chat function, not yet sure how that's working with the tech. I think you can use Twitter to write to the tech support, or if you have your microphone enabled, you can speak. If anyone wants to guess, what is this? An animal mentioned several times in the Bible. Used to live here in the land of Israel. Certainly doesn't live here anymore. Any guesses? Tech support, is there a way for people to submit their guesses? Pterodactyl? Nope. No, it's not a dinosaur. No. No, I try and stay away from controversial topics like dinosaurs. No, just kidding. I don't stay away from controversial topics, but this is not the hand of a dinosaur. This is the hand of a bear. A bear. Now, this particular one is from a cave bear from North America, which is now extinct. The bear that lived here was the Syrian brown bear, and the last one in Israel was killed 99 years ago. 99 years ago, near Tiberias, in a place called Nachal Amud. And the bear, of course, mentioned several times in Tanakh. The story of Elisha, that there were kids who were taunting him, mocking him, and they got eaten by bears. Many places in Tanakh where the bear is used as a symbol, as a metaphor. And that would be the Syrian brown bear, which lived here till 99 years ago. So they have several examples of animals that that used to live here and which don't live here anymore. But there are 2 or 3 animals that are mentioned in Tanakh, even though they never ever lived anywhere near here. So how do they come to appear in Tanakh? So there's a particular verse which speaks about how King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, had ships that would come every 3 years bringing gifts. They would bring, these ships would come from Tarshish, wherever that is, it's not clear. And it said that they would bring gold and silver and Shen Habim. What's Shen Habim? Shen Habim is ivory tusks, right? Elephant tusks. Right? So elephants never lived anywhere near here. But elephant ivory was imported, being given as tribute to King Solomon. What did he do with it? He used it to build his throne. It says that the king made his throne out of Vayas HaMelech Kisei Shen Gadol, it says, which can be translated as the king made his chair out of big teeth, or it can be translated as the king made a big chair out of teeth. Either way, it's talking about elephant teeth, elephant tusks, right? Elephant ivory. And it also says that these ships brought kofim. What's kofim? Monkeys. Right, so I don't have any live monkeys. Monkeys make very, very bad pets, as the Midrash says. Actually, the Midrash in Kohelet speaks about how monkeys and otters make terrible pets, which is true. And monkeys and otters, very playful animals. They look so cute, but as pets, they are terrible. They're very dangerous. They're very temperamental. They can cause, very powerful animals. Sharp teeth can cause a lot of injuries. So not recommended to keep live ones. So here we have a stuffed monkey. All right, so monkeys are, you can see that on your screens. All right, so monkeys are not native to Israel, but they were brought here as gifts for King Solomon. And the third creature that it mentions was brought for King Solomon was tukiyim. What's a tuki? So in modern Hebrew, tuki is a parrot, but in biblical Hebrew, it appears that tuki is a peacock. Okay, so peacocks not native to Israel, but they're nevertheless appear in Tanakh. Why? Because they were imported as gifts for King Solomon. And there's one other animal that's perhaps mentioned in the Torah, which is not native to the region, and that is the zamer. So in Parshat Re'eh, the book of Deuteronomy, there's a list of the kosher animals. One of them, the last one in the list, is the zamer. Now, what is a zamer? So there's different opinions. Some say it's a kind of wild sheep called a mouflon, which used to be native to these parts. But Sadyagon and others say there's a certain North African tradition that the zamer is the giraffe. Now, is that reasonable? Could the Jewish people receiving the Torah and the Sinai, could they have been familiar with giraffes? Would they have understood what that word is? And the answer is yes, they would have. Why? Because giraffes were, although giraffes are only native to southern Africa, but they were exported in antiquity, and they were sent around the world as gifts for kings and so on. So, for example, the pharaohs in Egypt, right, they had giraffes in their royal menageries. And I want to share with you a picture. Let's see if we can get this picture up. Hold on. Let's see if we can. Yeah, you're able to see that? So this is a mosaic from a synagogue in Gaza from 1,500 years ago showing a giraffe. So you see that even back in antiquity, people here were familiar with these animals. Now, do you notice something unusual about the giraffe? Okay, so notice anything odd about it? So its neck is a little bit short, but I don't think there's anything to be made of that. I think that's just because they wanted to make sure it fit in the circle. All the animals in this mosaic are depicted in circles, and I think they just wanted to make it fit. What I think is unusual about this giraffe, though, is that it's got a scarf. Right, why is it wearing a scarf? Cold? I don't think it's cold. So I think it's not a scarf. I mean, it's not a scarf worn for cold. It's a decorative scarf, more like a ribbon. Because remember, the giraffes that people here were seeing were not giraffes in the wild. Rather, it's giraffes that were imported as gifts for kings. And they used to dress them up. I think this giraffe has been decorated with a decorative scarf. All right, so the giraffe is another animal that's not native to these parts, but which may appear in Tanakh. I see somebody has sent in a question. Hold on, let me read that. Question from David Seidenberg. If monkeys were mentioned because they were imported and crocodiles were known through Egypt, how do we know that there were hippopotamuses were in Israel as opposed to something they knew about via trade or reports? Oh, excellent question. Okay, so first of all, about the crocodile. It's not that the crocodile was known through Egypt. The crocodile lived here too. All right, the crocodile, it symbolized Egypt, but it's not that it was known through Egypt. Okay, so how do we know that the hippopotamuses described in the book of Eov were local ones and not something they knew about from afar? So I would say because the hippopotamus is something that's described in its natural habitat. Right? It appears God is talking to Eov, to Job, about the hippopotamus, and he describes how it lives in the rivers and the shade of the swamps. So I think so number one is the assumption is that it's a natural scene that Eov would have been familiar with, rather than describing an animal from afar. And secondly, we have fossil remains. One of the guides back at my museum, he has a hippo tooth that he found in the Kinneret. The hippo remains have been found along the coast. We know there were hippos that used to live in the Nile also. So it's known from archaeological remains that hippos did used to live in the region. So that's the answer to that question. Now, let's move on to identifying some other animals. So, there's a very famous animal. Sorry, let me just turn off this screen share. Hold on. How do I do that? Click this icon. Screen share off. Are we back? Yeah, we're back. Now, one of the most common animals mentioned in the Torah is the tzvi. Right, a lot of references to an animal called a tzvi. Who can tell me what a tzvi is? So, hold on, there's just a picture I'm trying to find to show you. Oh, can't find it right now. So tzvi is usually identified as a deer. Right? You have the name Tzvi Hirsch, right? Hirsch being German, Yiddish for deer. Tzvi is usually identified as a deer. Let's just pull up a picture of a deer so we know what we're talking about. Here, we'll use this one. Let's pull that up. Okay, see that? Here we have a deer. This is the Mesopotamian fallow deer, right? Which is the deer that used to live in the land of Israel. Right, can I just, here, tech support, can you just write and just make sure that, let me know if you can see that on your screen? Danny, can you just let me know if you see it? Yep, good, okay. So this is the Mesopotamian fallow deer, used to live in Israel, was hunted to extinction in the wild at the turn of the 20th century, but been reintroduced a few years ago. So this is how most people identify the tzvi. However, that is not the correct translation. Now, how do I know that? Because the Gemara, Talmud discussing the tzvi, says that the horns of a tzvi are not branched. But if you look at the horns of this deer, right, they are branched. Let's see if we can use some of these nice drawing tools here. Now, as you can see, the tzvi does have branched horns. So, and the Gemara says that the horns of a tzvi are not branched, so tzvi is therefore not the deer. And right there in that Gemara, Rashi says that it must be that what we call a tzvi is not what the Torah calls a tzvi. So what does the Torah call a tzvi? What the Torah calls a tzvi is this animal. Hold on, let me pull up a nice picture of it. There, this one will do. Screen share. There we go. That is the tzvi of the Torah. It is a gazelle, which does not have branched horns. Now, so if the tzvi is really the gazelle and not the deer, why does everybody identify the tzvi as the deer? So this comes back to the point we mentioned earlier, that the animals of the Torah are the animals of Israel, which are different from the animals in different parts of the world and other parts of the world, right? That every part of the world has got different animals. You know, if you ever see Israelis go to New York for the first time, so you'll notice what are Israelis most excited to see in New York, even more than Target and Costco, and it's squirrels. The Israelis go crazy about the squirrels. And the Americans are like, what? It's disgusting vermin. What's to be excited about squirrels? Well, for the Israelis, it's very exciting because they'd never seen squirrels before. There are no squirrels in Israel, except the ones that escaped from my garden. Long story. But generally speaking, no squirrels in Israel. So Israelis are unfamiliar with them, right? Different parts of the world have different animals. The animals of the Torah are the animals of Israel. Those are not the same as the animals of America or of Europe. All right, so here in Israel, we have deer and we have gazelles. The deer is the ayal, and the gazelle is the tzvi. Two different animals. In Europe, on the other hand, they got lots and lots of deer, but they don't have any gazelles. Let me just get this monkey out of the way. So in Europe, they transferred the name tzvi from the gazelle to the deer, because the deer was all they had. That explains how that transposition came about. Another example, the nesher. Right, the nesher, the king of birds. What's a nesher? So nesher is usually translated as an eagle. However, that also cannot be correct. How do I know? Because there are verses which describe the nesher as being bald. Now, eagles are not bald. Right? Even the famous bald eagle, lovely head of hair. Wish I had as much hair as a bald eagle. Right? They just have white feathers on their head. They were originally called baldy-headed eagles. Baldy was an Old English word meaning white. They were white-headed eagles, but they're not bald. So which bird is bald? Plus, the nesher is described as feeding on carrion, dead animals, whereas eagles usually take live prey. So which bird is bald? It is the Griffon Vulture. Let's do a screen share here. All right, the Griffon Vulture. All right, this is the nesher of the Torah. It's bald, as you can see, feeds on carrion. That's the nesher, and it's the king of birds. It's the largest, most magnificent bird of prey in the Middle East. And he's also the king of birds, not just in terms of its size, but in its in that it's the lord of the air. It's the highest flying bird. Right? While every year I lead a tour to Africa, a tour of Africa to go and learn about the animals of the Torah. Right? Why are we going to Africa to learn about the animals of the Torah? If the animals of the because many of the animals of the Torah no longer live in Israel. Right? Nowadays, they only live in Africa. Right? Lions and cheetahs and hippos and crocodiles and so on. So anyway, one of the countries we go to is Zimbabwe. So we were flying to Zimbabwe, and suddenly the plane lurched, violently. Why did it lurch violently? So the pilot later explained that he was taking evasive action to avoid sucking a Griffon vulture into the engine. Griffon vultures fly at tremendous heights. In fact, if you look at the Guinness Book of Records, you'll see that the altitude record for a bird is held by a Griffon vulture, which collided with an airplane at 37,000 feet. Okay, so the Griffon vulture is the lord of the air, and that's the Nesher, the king of birds in the Torah. So if the Nesher is the Griffon vulture, why does everybody always translate Nesher as an eagle? Same as before, right? That in Europe, they had lots of eagles, didn't have too many Griffon vultures. So in Europe, they transferred the name Nesher from the Griffon vulture to the eagle, because eagles is all they had. Right? So again, clarifying this point that the animals of the Torah are the animals of the land of Israel, which are not the same as the animals of America or of Europe. And this is important, not just in terms of accuracy, getting to the accurate translation, but also for another reason. Every nation, every culture has its own national animals. Right? The animals that are part of its culture, of its heritage. Right? If you're an Aboriginal tribesman or tribeswoman from Australia, so what are your national animals? What are the animals of your culture, of your heritage? Like kangaroos, koalas, emus, bandicoots, things like that. Right? If you're an Eskimo from Alaska, so what are your national animals? Right? It's seals, killer whales, things like that. Right? What about as Jews? What are our national animals? What are the animals that are part of our culture, part of our heritage? Right? So it's not the gefilte fish and the Empire fried chicken. Right? It's lions and leopards and bears and crocodiles and hippos and Griffon vultures. Right? And these are not animals from New York or from England or from the shtetl in Europe. Right? These are animals that lived in biblical Israel. So learning about our national animals really connects us to the land of Israel. Right? And especially in an era where many people see us as just American or European colonialists. Right? This is something important to clarify. That one of our links to the land of Israel is through the wildlife. That these are our traditional texts. Our heritage has always been about these animals, and these are not animals from Europe. These are animals that lived in Israel in biblical times. Now, I think something escaped. No. So identifying animals. Now, there's also many smaller animals that are mentioned in Tanakh. For example, in Parashat Shemini, there's a list of 8 shrouded. Now, sheretz doesn't have a precise English translation. It means creeping creatures. It's kind of a category of small animals, including reptiles, certain mammals, things that are small, low to the ground. And there's a list of 8 types of shrouded that transmit tumah, that transmit spiritual impurity when they're dead. And this is, again, an interesting case study in animal identification. When the Torah mentions an animal, how do you know what it is? So if it's the Aryeh, right? So there's 150 verses about the Aryeh. It's obviously a lion, right? And there's a universal tradition. So about the Nesher, so the Nesher, we have clues. We're told that it's bald, that it feeds on carrion. It's the lord of the air, right? So we know enough clues enable us to say it's a Griffon vulture. But many of these smaller creatures that I mentioned, these shrouded, they're only mentioned once. How do you know what they are? And the answer is you don't know. You look at the etymology, you can look at other languages, but there's often different views. So, for example, one of these shrouded is the tsav. Now, what is a tsav? Anyone know what a tsav is? You can, if you have ability to text, you can send in your suggestion. Excuse me. So, in modern Hebrew, tsav is what we in England call a tortoise, and what Americans call a turtle. Right, that's what a tsav is. However, Rashi instead identifies tsav as a toad. So already you have 2 opinions as to what a tsav is. And then Rav Sadia Gaon identifies a tsav as a different creature, one which I brought home from the museum. I did this podcast from my home because at the museum, our internet connection is not so good. I hope at some stage in the future, we're going to upgrade there and be able to do webcasts from the museum, from the exhibits. But in the meanwhile, I'm doing this from home, and I brought some things home from the museum. So one of the things I brought home is Rav Sadia Gaon's Sav. And here he is. See that? The camera focusing on it. So what is this cute little fella? He is well, in English, he's called a Euromastix lizard. And he lives in the desert. He has a beautiful soft body, and he has a spiky tail. It is alive, if you're wondering. He's alive. He's just, it's not a very active lizard. In fact, one of the things he likes best is to lie on his back and tickle his tummy. And he goes into a kind of trance. See that? How to hypnotize a Euromastix lizard. Now, so what he did, this kind of lizard actually, they hide in rocks and fissures in the rock, and they just have this spiky tail sticking out, and then they inflate their body. The body's already quite flat, and they inflate it even more. And the predator who comes is just faced with this spiky tail, and he can't pull it out of the crevice. So that's how these lizards survive in the desert. Cute little guys. Anyway, so Sadia Gaon says that this is a Sav. Why? In fact, he identifies Sav with the Arabic name, Zab, which refers to this lizard, the Euromastix lizard. So therefore, so you have three different views as to what the Sav is, right? A turtle, a toad, and a Euromastix. Which is correct? So I don't know for sure, but I would place the greatest weight with the opinion of Rav Sadia. Why? Because Rav Sadia lived in this part of the world. Right, so he lived in Egypt and later in Israel. And you'll see, Rashi and Rav Sadia Gaon in many places have completely different identifications that they give for the animals of the Torah. Why? I think it reflects the fact that Rashi lived in northern France and Rav Sadia Gaon lived in the Middle East. Right? And it's like we said earlier, it's not just that the animals of the Torah are the animals from the land of Israel. You have to think of the ramifications of that. The ramifications of that is that biblical interpreters who lived in different parts of the world didn't have access to those animals. So in the same way as Rashi, when Rashi is discussing the tzvi, and when Rashi is discussing how the Gemara says that the tzvi does not have branched horns, and Rashi says, what do you mean? The hirsch does have branched horns, and Rashi says it must be what we call a tzvi here. What we call a tzvi is not what the Torah calls a tzvi. So what's going on there? So Rashi's acknowledging that in his time and place, that they're using different names for the animals. Why is that? Because France is not biblical Israel. Right? Medieval France is not biblical Israel. So in the same token, Rashi is identifying the animals of the Torah in general, including the shrouded, in terms of what he has in France, in Europe, whereas Sadia Gaon, living in Israel, is therefore going to be more likely to be on target with what the Torah is talking about. It's interesting. I did my dissertation on rabbinic encounters with zoology in the 19th century. Not a very crowded field. Anyway, 19th century was the first time that people started writing books on animals of the Torah. Right? I have some of them here behind me. All right. There you go. Here's some of them. All right. Now, the 19th century was very interesting. This was the this was the first era in history that people started writing books on animals of the Torah. And one of these books was written by a rabbi from Europe who came to Israel, and he was thrilled. Why? Because he was rediscovering all these animals that people from Europe were unfamiliar with, and was using them, to solve riddles of biblical zoology. For example, the Gemara speaks about how the mole does not have any eyes. And this rabbi says that in Europe, this was a source of great consternation for him because moles, they do have eyes. They're just little bitty eyes, but they do have eyes. But when he came to Israel, he realized that the mole of Israel is completely different from the mole of Europe. The mole in Israel is an animal called the mole rat, really ugly little thing that doesn't have any eyes. All right, so it's realizing that the animals of Tanakh are going to be different from the animals of Europe. Okay, so we've seen how identifying the animals of the Torah can be quite a challenge, but it's also something important, right? It's realizing that the animals of the Torah are going to be the animals of Israel, and learning it, and really you see that the mistakes that came about because of the exile, right? It's because the biblical natural history is really the history of the Jewish people, and it's a consequence of the exile that people lost familiarity with the animals of the Torah, because they were exiled to different parts of the world which didn't have these animals. Now that we're back in Israel, we can rediscover the identities of biblical animals, right? Rediscovering our national animals, the animals of our heritage. Okay, so identifying animals is also another, important aspect of biblical natural history. But that's not all the biblical natural history about. Another aspect is symbolism. Right? Most references to animals in Tanakh, animals are mentioned throughout Tanakh, and most of the time it's not referring to actual animals that appeared in an event. I have a few references to that. We mentioned, the bears that attacked the children that were taunting Elisha, right? The lion that Shimshon fought with. But most references to animals are not referring to actual animals. Rather, it's the prophets mentioning animals for symbolic, to give over symbolic ideas, right? Symbolic lessons. And by learning more about the nature of these animals, we can learn more about the symbolism they were trying to give over. So, if, for example, let's talk about the bear. Okay, so the bear is often mentioned in Tanakh as a symbol of something very angry, right? Something very dangerous, right? We know that bears are indeed very dangerous animals. Let's just get a picture so we can have that in mind, right? Bears, we know. Bear in Israel was the brown bear, huge, dangerous, get up to 1,500 pounds, right? Very dangerous animal. However, in Tanakh, when it talks about the symbolism of the bear, it speaks about a mother bear bereft of her cubs. And it's used as a symbolic idea. For example, when God wants to speak about how he's going to grow very angry with the Jewish people if they sin, he says, I'm going to tear them apart. I'm going to be like a mother bear whose cubs have been taken away from her. So why does he pick that symbolism of a mother bear bereft of her cubs? Why not a mother lion, a mother leopard? Likewise, in Mishle, in Proverbs, when it wants to speak about how dangerous a fool is. So it wants to say that a fool is more dangerous than the most dangerous thing you can imagine. Right? What's the most dangerous thing you can imagine? It speaks about a mother bear whose cubs have been taken away. So why a mother bear? Why not a mother lion, a mother leopard? So we have to understand a bit more about bears, right? So bears are, gigantic, right? The biggest brown bears, they can weigh 1,500 pounds. Now, how big is that 1,500 pound bear? How much did it weigh when it was born? What do you think? 100 pounds? 50 pounds? The answer is half a pound. Right? Tremendous size difference between young and adult. So because the baby bear is born so tiny, the mother bear has to invest an enormous amount of effort into raising it and weaning it. Now, the Hebrew word for love, ahava, is related to the word have, which means give. The more you give to someone, the more you come to love them. So because the mother bear is giving and investing so much in her young, she forges a very strong bond with them. And that's why she becomes so aggressive if her young are taken away from her. So this tremendous anger of the mother bear that's spoken about in Scripture, that's the result of the great investment that she has made in her young. So that gives us a great insight into that symbolism. Let's pick another example. Hold on, let me just get this other animal that's on the floor over here. Okay, let's see what's in the bag. This is another creature that I brought home from the museum. Like I said, I couldn't do the webcast in the museum because our internet speeds there are not good enough, so I had to bring stuff home. My wife doesn't know that I brought this one home. She wouldn't be so thrilled. Open the bag. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Okay. So here we have a beautiful snake. This is a small boa constrictor. Back at the museum, we have a 10-foot python, but that would have been a bit more of a handful to bring home. So I just settled for a smaller snake. Oops. We dropped him. There we go. Beautiful boa constrictor. Now, snakes are, of course, famously mentioned in the Torah in the story of the Garden of Eden, right? Where the story is that God says to Adam and Eve, don't eat from the tree of knowledge or you'll become mortal. And the snake says, go ahead, eat from it, you'll be fine. And so what happened? So the snake told a lie, right? That God said you'll be mortal, and the snake said, no, go, it's fine to eat from it. And so the snake told a lie, and what's his punishment? It lost its legs. Now, that's the punishment. So what do we make of that story? So you might want to point out that in certain snakes, like this, snakes in the boa family, so the males have little remnants of legs. I don't know if the camera is high enough resolution to show it. Let me see if I can get this on the camera. You find the legs. Here they are. Okay, so male boas have teeny little bony spurs coming out at the back. Let me get this on the camera. There's one over there. You see that? Is that focusing on that one? And then one on the other side. Oh, yeah, that was the other side. This is this side. Let's see if we can get that. I don't know if you can see it. If not, you can Google it. All right, little bony spurs that come out of a snake, remnants of legs. So what does that have to do with the biblical story? So personally, I would say nothing at all. All right, nothing at all. I don't think that's connected to the biblical story. Why? Well, basically, there's two different views about the story of the snake. There are those who say that, yes, it was actually a snake. Right? It was the ancestor of these snakes. So I guess to those who take that view, the fact that the snakes have remnants of legs would be significant. But Rambam and Fauna and others say no. They say that, no, it wasn't actually talking about a reptile. Rather, it's a symbol. It's a metaphor. Right? Rambam says that the description of the snake in the Garden of Eden is a symbol for it's a symbol for man's eternal struggle with his evil inclination. But if it's not literal, if it's not literally talking about a snake, if it's a metaphor, but still the snake is being used as the metaphor, right? So there's got to be some symbolic significance to the idea of the snake losing its legs as a result of telling a lie. So what's that? What's the symbolism? So it's very simple. It's like with the English expression, if you tell a lie, you haven't got a leg to stand on. And the way the Gemara uses that expression, the Gemara says, "Sheker ein lo raglaim," a lie has no legs. Right? In other words, truth is something that has foundation, that has a basis, right? Symbolically represented as legs. Right? Truth stands. A falsehood, a fantasy, has no basis and it collapses. Right? Symbolically, it has no legs. And it's often said how it's reflected in the Hebrew letters of the words, that truth is emet, made up of the letters aleph, mem, taf. Right? Each letter has two legs. Aleph, mem, taf. Right? Each letter has two legs. Whereas falsehood is sheker, shin, kuf, resh, which each letter just has one leg. Each letter just stands on a point. All right, so that's the idea of the snake losing its legs. That if you tell a lie, you haven't got a leg to stand on. That's the symbolism. Now, the snake also, there's another interesting mention of the snake in the Midrash. So, where's the book? Can't find it. So there's an old Midrash called Perek Shira, which I have an English version of called Nature's Song. Oh, there it is. I saw it in the reflection. Here we go. Nature's Song. This is a book of mine in Perek Shira. And Perek Shira goes through different animals, speaks about the lessons that we learn from them. And each animal gets a verse from Scripture to allude to what there is to learn from it. And the snake's verse is Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim v'zokef l'chol hakfufim. Right, that God supports all the fallen. So what does that have to do with snakes? So there's a midrash about how, speaking about the snake, which says about how even God's curse contains a blessing. Why? The midrash says that the curse of the snake is it doesn't have legs, but that contains a blessing that snakes are very agile. Right? So the idea is that snakes don't have legs, and in that sense, they're very lowly creatures. But snakes have incredible agility. And as somebody who's been keeping snakes for a couple of years, I can tell you, snakes are the best escape artists. They are superbly good at escaping from the smallest nook and cranny. They can stand on their tails and squirm their way up. So the idea the Midrash is teaching us there is that even if an animal that appears in a lowly state nevertheless has advantages to that state. And likewise in life, even if we're going through a hard time, there may be some small aspect that's going well, which we can seize upon to realize that God has not abandoned us, that God is still with us. And that's the verse of Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. Okay, so let's put this boa constrictor away. I have to tie the bag very tightly. I have to say that last week I had a bit of an accident. I was sending a reptile somewhere, and I put it in one of these bags, and I had not knotted it tightly enough. And I put that bag in another bag, and then at the other end, lo and behold, it had escaped. So I really want to make sure to knot this very, very tightly. There we go. Double knot it just for security. Right. Put him back over here. You should not to step in it. Fine. Okay. Did I ever find the reptile again? Yes, it did turn up eventually. Okay, next. So that's to mention the idea of symbolism. Now, another major area of Torah and the animal kingdom is, of course, kashrut, right? Identifying which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher. If you're able to come visit the museum, we have a whole exhibit devoted to that. So with mammals, it's that a kosher mammal is one that has split hooves and chews the cud. And there's also some other indications of kosher animals to do with their certain skull characteristics. With birds, the Torah gives a list of birds that are not kosher, and any bird that's not in that list is kosher. All right, the problem is we can't exactly identify all the birds on the Torah's list. So in practice, we only eat birds if there's a Masorah, if there's a tradition of that bird being eaten. And there is a tradition for quite a few birds. Interestingly, a couple of weeks ago at the museum, we held a very special event for our supporters. We had a feast of biblical flora and fauna, which was we had foods from Tanakh, right, foods that you see in biblical times that were eaten. So let me just, which is, so chicken, for example, which is now considered to be, the staple Jewish food, but that is not a biblical food. Right, there's no chickens mentioned in Tanakh. Why? Because chickens did not live in the land of Israel in biblical times. So the chicken is not a biblical bird. So what was a biblical bird? Let me just pull up the pictures here to show you. Where do we have it? Here we go. Okay. So let me do the screen share. All right. So here we have two soups that we served. So one of them is lentil soup. Right. That's what Esau bought from Yaakov, and this soup is dove soup. Right, the dove, the yonah, is a kosher bird. All right, now interestingly, so in the Torah it mentions a tor and a yonah. So tor is a turtle dove, and yonah is a rock dove. Right, yonah is the bird also that Noah sent off the ark. Now, rock doves also have another name by which they're better known, and that is. Wait 1 second, actually. First, let me show you a picture of the rock dove. Then I will talk about its alternate name. You find it a second. My picture's mixed up here. Here we go. Okay, so here is the yonah, the rock dove, right? The beautiful white dove that Noah sent off his ark, and that's what we served. But this bird is known by another name. It's a pigeon. Right, pigeons, the street rats of New York City and many other places, it's the exact same species as the white dove. The pigeon is actually the authentic, natural coloration of the wild bird as it lives in the wilderness of the land of Israel. Right, the white dove is a color mutation. So this is the yonah is actually a pigeon. It's just that what I discovered is that there's so much cultural negativity associated with pigeons. If you tell people they're eating pigeons, it's just disgusting for them. But if you tell people that it's a dove, then okay, the dove is something that sounds attractive even to eat. So that's one example of a kosher biblical bird. But here's another one. Let me find a nice picture of it. So here's another biblical bird that is eaten, a kosher bird that we served, skewered and pomegranate spears. Anyone know what this is? So let me find a picture of the live specimen to show you. Where's our live specimen? Hold on, just misplaced the picture here. Oh, here we go. Here's the baby one. Wait, let's get a full-grown one. Here's the baby. I only find the picture of the baby one. Screen share this. Okay, let's see if we can zoom in on this. This is a baby quail. All right, this is a quail. All right, the children of Israel in the wilderness, they ate slav. That's the quail. That's a kosher bird, and we breed quail at the museum. So for the dinner, we shechted 75 quails. Right? Another example of a food. It's a bird that was eaten in biblical times. There weren't people weren't eating chickens or eating quails. And then I just want to show you a picture of one of the mammals that we served also. All right. Again, so nowadays the only mammals that we eat basically is just cattle. Okay, you might have sheep. But in biblical times, we mentioned sense that in the King Solomon's table, they served deer, venison. So this is a whole venison, which we barbecued whole and served at the dinner. So as birds and mammals, it's not only, but there's other kosher categories, right? Fish are kosher if they have fins and scales. And the final category of kosher creatures is insects, right? So of course, most insects are not kosher, but there is one type of insect that is kosher. Let's get it out of its cage here. I don't want it to escape. Hold on. Oh. Ah. Okay. So here we have the kosher insect. This is a locust. This is a live locust, one of the colonies raised in the museum. Now, most insects are not kosher. Not every locust is kosher, but the Torah says that certain types of locusts are kosher. It lists certain varieties of locusts that are kosher. Why are locusts kosher? So, we don't know. The Torah doesn't give a reason, but we can propose, we can point out something. That when locust plagues happen, they are absolutely devastating. They wipe out everything. And the result is a famine. Right? 101 years ago, in 1915, there was a locust plague in Israel, and it caused famine. People were literally starving to death. But not the people who caught the locusts, right? Because locusts are kosher, and you can eat them, and they're very healthy. Right? High in protein, low in fat, very healthy food. Yeah, this is live, by the way, so I can kick a bit. Yeah, there we go. Right, he's live. Now, but how do you know today which are the kosher locusts mentioned in the Torah? So certain communities of Jews, Yemenites, Algerians, Moroccans, they all have a tradition as to which type of locust is kosher, and it's this one, the desert locust, Schistocercia gregaria. Now, I personally am not Yemenite, as you might be able to guess. So how can I, as a non-Yemenite, rely on the Yemenite tradition and eat locusts? So the answer is as follows. It's not like with kitnios. With kitnios, for example, there is an Ashkenaz tradition not to eat kitnios and Pesach. So because I have, as an Ashkenazi, because I have a tradition not to eat kitnios and Pesach, I cannot rely on the Sephardic tradition to eat kitnios and Pesach. But with locusts, it's not the case. There's no European tradition that the locust is not a kosher insect. Rather, it's just that there weren't any locusts in Europe. Right? It's not a negative tradition. It's just the absence of a positive tradition. Right? It's like not everybody has a Masorah for quail, because quail are not found in every part of the world. But because some people do have a Masorah for quail, then other people are able to adopt that Masorah and eat quail. Right? So therefore, because there's no European tradition against locusts, so many halachic authorities rule that it's legitimate to adopt the tradition from those who have it. So that's how we were able, that's how I as an Ashkenazi can eat locusts, and that's how we were able to serve locusts at our biblical dinner. Let me just show you how we prepared them. Let's get the picture because they were prepared. Here we go. This is the best picture. Let's do the screen share. There we go. Locusts covered in chocolate-dipped locusts. Crunchy on the outside and a chewy center. But my wife did not like them at all. She's locust intolerant, so she did not enjoy the chocolate-covered locusts. Okay, so he hit this guy back in his cage. Return him. Oops, don't want him to escape. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the class. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are ever in Israel, please come visit the Biblical Museum of Natural History, located in Bet Shemesh. It's guided tours only, so you have to book in advance. You can do so. You can visit our website. I'm just going to type in the website into the chat box here, which hopefully you could see it. Oh, 1 second. You've lost the video of me. How have you lost the video of me? Oops. Something's gone wrong here with the screen share. My camera. Don't know why the camera's gone off. Anyway, the website for the museum, biblicalnaturalhistory.org. Right, that's how you can go to find out more about the museum and to book a tour. We also have books. I mentioned the Torah Encyclopedia of the Animal Kingdom, which goes through all the animals, describing all of them, all of the animals in Tanakh, in the Chazal, and so on. Sorry, one more. And very nice to have met you all in cyberspace, and we look forward to other learning opportunities in the future. So thank you very much. If anybody wants to email me, I'll pop in my email address here into the chat box. It's director@biblicalnaturalhistory.org. There we go. That's the chat box. I don't know why the camera's gone off, but I'll just leave you with a, see if I can do the screen share and leave you with a picture from the museum. There we go. That's our larger snake. It's now a bit bigger than in that picture. So thank you very much, and have a good day.